for UFC Fight Night, Derek Lewis versus Travis Browne. Let's start at the bottom. The first fight is Gerald Manchester versus Ryan James. And Gerald looks like a really good wrestler with some really good submissions, like chokes especially. But I think Ryan James just looks better overall. I think he's a lot taller, a lot bigger, and a much better striker. He's primarily a jiu-jitsu guy, but I was really impressed with his overall game. And his debut, he fought at light heavyweight. So I think now that he's fighting at his natural weight class, I think we're going to see the real Ryan James. And I think he'll probably either win a decision or maybe win by TKO. Next is Jack Marshman versus Thiago Santos. And even though Thiago Santos has lost his last couple, I feel like he just kind of got caught against a really good jiu-jitsu guy in his last fight. I still feel like he's a guy that could crack into the top 15. I think that this is a perfect fight for him to bounce back with, because Jack Marshman to me just looks like a guy who's okay everywhere but not amazing anywhere. He's got, striking, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu, but it's all just okay. I think that Thiago Santos will be able to stuff any takedown attempts Jack tries, and I think he'll just be able to eat him up on the feet and probably win by knockout. The second round, probably. Next is Ayman Zabib versus Ronaldo Vera. And Ronaldo was on The Ultimate Fighter. He won it, but he just hasn't looked amazing since he won it. He lost to a guy that was just okay, in my opinion. I think Zabib looks like a really solid up-and-comer, and I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know who's the favorite in this one, but I think Zabib might be the underdog. I think he'll pull the upset. He looks like he's got really strong wrestling, really strong striking and jiu-jitsu. And I just think he looks like a really solid up-and-comer, so I'll pick Zabib probably to win by TKO. Next is Nordine Taleb versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. And to me, Santiago Ponzinibbio is like the biggest underrated guy in the welterweight division. I think he's got really solid everywhere game, especially his striking. I think Nordine, he plays it safe a little bit too much for me, in my personal opinion. I think he waits a little too much a lot of the time. And that's solid against lesser strikers, but I don't think that that's a good strategy to have against a guy like Santiago. I think Santiago is going to be able to continuously pressure forward against this guy, and he might even eventually catch Nordine and knock him out, but I don't think he'll do that, but I think he'll be able to win a decision just because it's kind of volume versus precision, and I don't think Nordine will be able to knock out Santiago, and I don't think he'll be able to take him down either. Next is Carla Esparza versus Ronda Marcos, and Ronda Marcos is just okay. She's got like a 500 record in the UFC. I don't think her takedown defense is amazing. I think she's got good offense but not great defense, and I think we've seen that in her last couple fights. I think Carla Esparza is still one of the top 5 women in the world in that weight class, the 115. I think Carla will be able to get this fight to the ground sooner or later, and when she does, she'll either probably win by TKO with ground and pound or submission. Probably first or second round. I just think it's going to be a pretty one-sided fight. Next is Alessandro Ricci versus Paul Felder, and this is kind of like Paul Felder's last stand right here. I feel like he's basically fighting a shittier version of himself. I think Ricci basically, he fights a lot like Paul Felder. I think he has the same style, just a lot less knockouts, and that's what this is Paul Felder versus himself, but with less power, striking-wise. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think it'll be a back-and-forth striking match, but I think eventually Felder, with the power advantage, is going to just land the more significant strikes as the fight goes on and probably win by TKO. Next is Sarah McMahon versus Jean McKenzie. And Jean looks okay. I think she's just alright everywhere. She's not amazing. I know she's a really late replacement in this fight, and I think that Sarah McMahon is just going to be able to take her down whenever she wants, and she'll probably win with ground and pound or submission. You know what I mean? She's an amazing wrestler. That's not the smartest idea to take a fight on short notice against somebody like her. So I just got Sarah McMahon. I think it'll be a pretty dominant first-round win. Next is Elias Theodorou versus Cesar Ferreira, and I don't think Cesar Ferreira is that good. I think he's just kind of fought some guys that stylistically he's matched up well against. He's been rocked really bad, and even though he's on a 3-fight win streak, he's been hurt in almost every single one of those fights with strikes. I don't think his chin's very good, and I think if he can't get his wrestling off, then he's kind of fucked. And I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think he'll be able to take Elias down. I think sooner or later Elias is going to hit him with a solid combination and probably knock him out. Next is Sam Sicilia versus Gavin Tucker, and Gavin Tucker is a really, really solid prospect. I think it's pretty obvious that they, are setting him up against a pretty solid veteran, but they want him to win this one. I think Sam Sicilia is really good. I think, he's got good striking, good wrestling, a couple good chokes submission-wise. But I just think Gavin Tucker looks really, really impressive. And I think sooner or later, Gavin's going to win by knockout or submission. I think Gavin's solid pretty much everywhere. And I just think it's one of those things where he's like, he could be like Doo-Ho Choi maybe in a couple of years. Next is Johnny Hendricks versus Hector Lombard. And this is a really weird fight because John Hendricks hasn't looked amazing his last couple fights, and you never know. It could just because he's older and it's hard to make that weight cut. I don't think it is. I think it's just because he's been getting lazier and he hasn't been taking this as seriously. To me, Hector Lombard, even though he's lost his last couple, he looked really good in both those fights. I mean, the fight with Neil Magny, I thought he won the first 2 rounds, and then he's just really gassed and got finished in the third. And then the fight with Dan Henderson was another fight that I thought he was winning, and then he just got caught with a really big shot in the second. So with Hector Lombard, it's not so much that he's looked like he's gotten shittier. It's just, you know, he gets tired. That's always been his biggest weakness, and then guys just capitalize on it. With Johnny Hendricks, he just hasn't looked as good in general. And like I said, it could be that he was older and he's cutting too much weight. I just don't think that's it. I think that he just isn't taking it as seriously. And I also think that, in all honesty, I don't think he has the wrestling. I think Hector Lombard's judo-style takedown defense is better, and I think his striking is better than Johnny Hendricks' too. Especially in his last couple fights, Johnny Hendricks just been relying on his wrestling and not really his striking. So I think Hector Lombard's probably going to win by knockout sooner or later. Next is Derek Lewis versus Travis Browne. And I think this fight is way closer than people are giving it credit for. I think Travis Browne, his last couple of wins, even though he's only gone like 3-4 in his last 7, have all been against guys that are about Derek Lewis level, in my opinion. All of his losses, if you look at them, they were like to fucking 2 times to Verdum and to Kane. And then that one loss to Arlovsky. Aside from that loss to Arlovsky, all those mid-level guys like the Matt Mitrione and the Brendan Schaub, Travis Browne's beaten. And I think that stylistically this is a good matchup for Travis Browne, in all honesty. I don't think Derek Lewis is a better grappler than Travis. I think Travis is bigger and he can kind of wear Derek down a little bit. And I also think Travis has a big reach advantage. And I think Derek Lewis has a hard time with guys with big reach because we saw it in the Matt Mitrione fight. I think Derek Lewis is a solid up-and-comer, but I actually feel like that stylistically this favors Travis Browne. And unless Travis Browne's completely shot, which I don't think he is, I think he's going to pull off an upset and surprise a lot of people, and I think he's going to win by knockout, probably in the first or second round. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.